Okay, a few more things I wanted to cover in a demo situation, like kind of tips and whatnot that some are obvious, maybe, and some maybe not so much. So when you run this thing and you have it all set up, this is it'll automatically connect. So I only have one robot arm right now, so it connected to the one, and when it does, it shows it where it is on the map. And basically, these are your peripherals down here, what's connected. So we want to get a wireless button connected in the gamepad button, or the gamepad controller. So hold that to turn that on, and when it connects, come on, when it connects. Well, let me pause this until it connects. Okay, it connected. So when it connects, then you get this little green button down here showing that it's connected. And sometimes it times out, and if you haven't used the controller in a while, so you just got to turn it back on again. And it's smart enough to know if the robot's running, and it times out, you can still just turn on your controller and wait for it to connect, and then it'll start working again. You don't have to stop the robot or restart the program or anything. If you want to know what the buttons do, you can click on the button, or you can click on that gamepad button, and you can get a little visual of how to move the robot around. The important thing to know is that this button right here enables or disables remote control of it, basically. So when I push it, it then puts the screen border around this and highlights the robot that is the one that you can now drive around. So I can drive him around, and you can see on the map he updates, and on the camera, it updates basically. Anyway, there's a bunch of buttons that let you test things, but more important and then if you need to switch robots, if I had multiple robots, I'd click these top buttons to rotate through the different robots to control, basically. So that's helpful to know, and then it'll remember what robot you were last on. So if you're on this bottom robot, then when you push this button to untake control, it turns off, and then when you turn it back on again, it'll pick up on that last robot. So you can kind of put it on your trouble robot, and then always know when you turn on your remote, it will connect to that trouble robot. The other thing to know about that that's useful is that you can get something playing like this. I'm gonna say drive in a square, test square. And you can see him drive around. He's going in a square, but then I can take control of him like that. And now I can control him. And so if this is a demo scenario, maybe he's bumping into something or he's slightly off course, and you don't want to pick him up and move him. I'll show you why in a moment. But you just want to adjust him a little bit. You can just take control of him, readjust him a little bit, whatever you need to do, and then untake control of him. And then he'll continue on playing the rest of that program exactly where he left off. So that's a good way to do it. It's the same as like coming over here and pressing the pause button. Basically, you can, well, he's stopped now because he just finished his program, but it's like when you take control of him, it'll pause whatever is being played back, and then when you remove control, it will unpause that, basically. So that allows you to do some little tweaks to the path if you see him like he's bumping into a wall, or he's hung up on something, or you need to just recorrect his course slightly. The reason to do that is, let's say here he is on the map. What happens is normally the localization isn't perfect. So if I come over here and I were to tell him to dock, to his charger, now he's going to go and get back on his charger. And you're going to see on the map that he doesn't quite line back up where he left off. So he's turning around right now and he's backing up. There he goes, and he's back in the right spot, right? But on the map, he's a little bit off. What happens is he'll relocalize. Now, that time it didn't work, but usually what happens is he'll relocalize to this location and reset himself, reset his position, basically. So that's kind of still work in progress, but also, if you were to pick him up, let's say he was running around, let's get him going. So basically, that's a technique that he does by himself to try and get his map to reline up with what he's actually doing, because things kind of get off after a while. The other thing to see is that if he was driving a course, let's run this one going in a square again. If he was driving a course and I were to pick him up, now I'm going to go pick him up, but I want you to see what it looks like on the map as I do that. So I picked him up. You can see that he reruns back to his starting position. Okay, so at that point, you pretty much need to put him back on his charger. So I put him back on his charger. Oh wait, he's going crazy right now. There he goes. So you basically put him back on his charger, and you have stopped the program, and you've got to restart from the beginning. So if you were to solve a problem, he's running around and he's halfway through the circuit and he's like, oh, he's having trouble, I'm just going to pick him up. Then you basically have to restart the whole program and start him back on his charger. So that's why it's like, if you're in those situations, you're like, oh, he's just slightly off course. You want to just, you know, take control and readjust that course just slightly, and then remove that remote control, you know, basically. So that's a good technique to know. The other one to know is how this button works. So over here, I showed it last video shortly, but I'm going to show you a little more details. So these also fall asleep after about 10 minutes of not being used. And the first time you push the button, it'll do this long blue flash. And you can see on here, it's not quite recognized that it's connected yet. Now that's kind of normal. It can take up to about 30 seconds or so that first time it does it. However, it will be recognized as a button push basically that first time. In this scenario, it's still not too happy. Oh, let's see. One sec. Let me restart this. So it works here. I was just debugging this, so. Okay, restarting. Alright, so I push that button. It kind of needs that the first time to then, you know, connect and recognize it and everything like that. There it goes. So now it picked it up. So it stays blue on here. That's just indicating that it has activated itself, but it'll work at that point basically. So now when I press it in the future, it'll, you know, when you hold it down, it's blue. So you can kind of test it, make sure it's working basically. And then I'm going to simulate it falling asleep again by taking out the batteries and putting them back in. One sec. Okay, so I reset the batteries. So I'm going to press it again. You can see that long flash of blue. And then when we watch here, eventually it should pick itself up and recognize that it reconnected. So it's not perfect, but that's kind of how these buttons work. It's just good to know as you're working with it that that's how it's functioning basically. Come on, should have shown up by now. Well, it's not happy, huh? Well, something to test. It has been working pretty well for me. Anyway, if it becomes an issue, obviously you can always, like I mentioned before, you can always uncheck that and disable it, or never activate it in the first place. When you start the application, I'm gonna just quit the application and restart it. When you restart the application, it starts out grayed out, so it's the same and it's not checked. So it's basically until you push that button, it won't go through the process of activating itself and everything like that. So yeah, you can use it or not, but that's kind of some troubleshooting tips on how to do that, and some troubleshooting, sort of running the demo sort of tips for how to correct the robot position without having to restart everything. Of course, the simplest thing is you can always, you know, grab the robot and usually, here I'll show you this too. If you, let's say I were to, yeah, I'll just run this in a square again. So if I were to just grab this robot and flip him up, then he stops usually, and he just resets, and then you can just put him on his charger basically. So I actually didn't do it that time. Oh, there he goes. Yeah. So you can always just grab him and then you kind of flip him upside down and he resets, and you can put him back on his charger basically, and then restart your program. Otherwise, you can pause it with the controller, readjust his course a little bit, and then unpause him and have him keep going basically. Okay, hope that helps.